All right, folks, Deuteronomy chapter 32 through 34. We are finishing up the book of Deuteronomy today, and it's good stuff. Let's just take a moment and rejoice of where we've come here. We have completed today the Pentateuch, or the Torah, or the Law, the first 5 books of the Bible. We have read through from uh, one verse through to the end. And that's a good accomplishment in of itself, isn't it? These are the um, sections that we people tend to get lost in, or stopped in, rather, maybe on their reading through the Bible in a year like we're doing. So it's exciting to have gotten here, and I am learning so much. I am learning how much I don't know about so much, and processing some things, and seeing just light bulbs come up. So all the mix of the experience, and continue to be curious about what you're experiencing as well. Not having a lot of textual interaction here, but I'm seeing consistent views on these videos. So it's good to see that I'm not only hopefully talking to myself here. So curious where you're at. I still hear other places some comments about people just feeling maybe lost or confused, or way in over our heads. So again and again and again, I think I've said, yes, there's a lot here. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of things that I don't understand. But I think that we've consistently, I've at least consistently seen across these readings so far key themes, major emphases, major events, things that big picture carry the story forward, and big things that highlight what we are to be thinking about, at least as we go through the story so far. Deuteronomy, we're going to see again. We'll see. I think I'll highlight the major theme here. We've seen throughout is mostly kind of in the mouth of Moses. Moses is traditionally the author of sometimes they're called the 5 books of Moses. And we'll see at the end here that there had to, wherever you think of that, there had to be at least someone else or others involved, because the last bit of this describes what happens after Moses dies. So there's a lot of discussion, and you can read commentaries about different theories about how these books kind of came together when, and that sort of thing. But we're not doing that so much here in this study. We're wanting to know what's the content of what's in these books. What are the messages and themes that are being communicated to us? What do we need to understand as we understand this big picture unfolding narrative of God's God's story with this people, God working from creation in through with his people. So we see that sort of going on here. So chapter 32, that comes out of flows from the end of chapter 31. Moses recited the words of this song from beginning to end in the hearing of the whole assembly of Israel. So that everybody would have heard this is the idea. And I'm not going to certainly read it all. Listen, you heavens, and I will speak. Hear, you earth, the words of my mouth. So this is a big scope here. This kind of proclamation of this over the everything, all creation, so to speak, and this bold proclamation. Let my teaching fall like rain. Let my words descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants. Quite an interesting rhetorical introduction to this here. And I like verses 3 and 4 indeed. I will proclaim the name of the Lord. Oh, praise the greatness of our God. It sounds like a call to worship, right? He is the rock. His works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong. Upright and just is he. So that praise, followed by the next paragraph and what's to follow and the interspersion of these things are kind of perhaps or at least a major thrust in the book of Deuteronomy. Before that as well, too, we saw it very much in not Exodus, Leviticus, somewhat Numbers, a lot. But the next one, verse 3, they are corrupt and not his children. To their shame, they are a warped and crooked generation. Is this the way you repay the Lord, you foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father, your creator, him who made you and formed you? So again, it goes on like in verse 8. When the Most High gave you the nations, when he divided all mankind, the Lord's portion is his people, and Jacob his inheritance. And it goes through. I mean, so there's this interspersion again, this both and of God's faithfulness, God's provision, God's care. Another good example of that is a beautiful example is in verse 11, still in chapter 32. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, spreads its wings to catch them and carries them aloft. The Lord alone led him. No foreign God was with him. So there's this double punch of God has been faithful. God made promises. God has been faithful. God rescued. God provided. God is there. God is faithful. And you, us people, have been consistently problematic. Not trusting God, turning away, questioning God, turning to idols. And that's going to be the big thing, turning away from devotion to God, attention to other worship of other gods, right? Idols, turning away from God is the big issue. Both currently and looking forward, as we've seen, Deuteronomy has done a lot of looking forward to what God's people will do in ongoing unfaithfulness and the repercussions of that. And yet God is faithful, as we'll see in the stories as we go on. God will still call people back. He will be faithful even when they are, or we are, we could say, unfaithful. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that again, just kind of back and forth in here and all mixed within. So like verse 16, they made him jealous with their foreign gods and angered him with their detestable idols. They sacrificed to false gods, which are not God. God they had not known. God they had recently appeared. Gods your ancestors did not fear. You deserted the rock who fathered you. You forgot the God who gave you birth. So interesting, interesting poetic type language and imagery that's used here for God, God's provision, God's care for them. And when you read things like you sacrifice to them, this is not like accidental idolatry. This is not like, oops, you slipped away without knowing it. This is not the unintentional sin of Leviticus that still brings a sacrificial offering aspect to it. This is rebellion. God has told you, do not do this, and they do it. We'll talk more about the temptation of the why as we move forward, because it's going to come up a lot. But anyway, that is the big picture. That is the major concern that we see here as time goes by. And there's no kind of punches pulled about God's being angry about it, right? For verse 22, for a fire will be kindled by my wrath, one that burns down to the realm of the dead below. So God's revelation of his character is slow to anger, and yet there's things that with persistence, and even some things that are so obvious with their unfaithfulness that there's no, it ought not to surprise us when God gets angry about idolatry. So, one challenge for us is going to be as we look more at idolatry all throughout the Old Testament story. I'll try to think about challenging some application for us as well too, because it's a little bit different in our cultural world. What does idolatry look like? We'll see instances in the New Testament of the word used as well. That'll give us some things to think about here. So let's move on. Towards the end of chapter 32, we have here again. We've already seen this. It's been revealed to us that Moses is not going to make it into the promised land. Remember at the beginning of Deuteronomy, Moses blames the people and not himself for what happened that leads him to not be able to enter the promised land. But here, that's not the case. Here, like in Numbers, Moses bears responsibility and Aaron for their own actions. So in verse 48, so in chapter 32, on the same day the Lord told Moses, go up to in the mountain range to Mount Nebo in Moab, across from Jericho. So again, they're across from Jericho. They're poised, I think it's a great word, to enter the promised land. And this Deuteronomy is kind of this, let's do some business, guys. Let's have a talk. Let's have our come to Jesus moment before we are ready to go in. To view the land of Canaan, the land I am giving to the Israelites as their own possession. So you're not going to be able to go into it, but you're going to see it, which I think is understood as being a gift, even though it's, I'm sure, frustration as well. There in the mountain you have climbed, you will die and be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. So sometimes we have this question, would you want to know how you're going to die? Well, Moses has been told for a while now how he's going to, how and kind of when he's going to die. We're not told the actual, cause of death, or whether it's, whatever that is. But this is because both of you broke faith with me in the presence of the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin, because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites. And again, if you want to know what that's about, go back to that passage that we saw in the book of Numbers. Therefore, you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I am giving you to the people of Israel. Now, this is, of course, huge. We're at the end of, Moses has been a main character for Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the main character. God is the main character, but human character. Aaron's dead, and now Moses is going to die. I've been on Mount Nebo. It's a fun place to be, assuming it's the correct spot today. I think they believe that it is. But you can see like this overlook, like you can see it. I think it's okay. It's in chapter 34. So I'll pause just for a second. I'll talk more about Mount Nebo in a minute. So in chapter 33, Moses blesses the tribes. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. So let's get right there. Let's get right to 34, and we'll finish a little bit quicker today, unless I find something that I want to start preaching about, which you never know. So 34, Mount Nebo. There the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory from Ephraim to Manasseh, and all the land of Judah, as far as the Mediterranean Sea. You can see on a clear day, and not all days are clear here, but you can see way out. Like, this is not that much. Maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but you can see really widely. And there's when you're up there, there's a church there and an overlook, and there's some cool art and things. They have the bronze thing representing the bronze snake, but they've got a little kind of a layout. Map's the wrong word, but it shows directionally where these places are, where Jerusalem is today. And if it's clear, and it's not always clear, it's amazing how far you can see out over the promised land. It's a perfect lookout spot to see this land. So Moses does not get to enter the promised land with the people until when? Until the transfiguration of Jesus, right? And Peter, James, and John are there, and Jesus, along with Moses and Elijah, right? And we'll maybe talk about that when we get to it, right? In the Gospels. But the Moses, the law, and he's also called the prophet here. Elijah, well known for the prophets. But Moses is there in the promised land. I just think that's cool at the transfiguration. What does it mean for him to be there? You know, the presence and all that is, I don't know. But I think that's kind of course, the focus is on Jesus there. But I think it's cool that Moses gets there in the transfiguration. I don't know. I think that's neat. Any case. And then, so in verse 4, then the Lord said to him, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And again and again and again, I've emphasized that that foundational stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what continues and to be major themes and what gets kind of less emphasized after they enter and occupy the land. But we've just seen so much focus on the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We've seen so much focus on Egypt, on the Exodus, God's saving of His people, God's provision for the people, the manna, the leading them in the wilderness. So much about God, these kind of boom, 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 God's promises to Abraham, and then descendants. Boom, God's rescue of His people from Egypt, God's provision for the people, all along the way. And of course, then the flip side of that is the people's, what do you want to call it? Fickleness, whining, complaining, rebelling, unfaithfulness. Okay. But anyway, so this is the land. This is the land I promised. Now it's been a while. It's been more years before that, more years before they got to Egypt, more years in Egypt, 40 years wandering. And it's just, man, the thing about God's promises, secure, God's timetable, flexible from our point of view, right? Or frustrating from sometimes our point of view. It's beyond the scope of any one life, even, or sometimes multiple generations of life. And that's something for us to think about and wrestle with. Of course, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't see it either. So, but Moses is close. It's so close I can see it. But he can't get there, at least not until the transfiguration. There, verse 5, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. He buried him. Or I guess, let's see, we got a footnote, or he was buried. So did God bury him? Seems kind of mysterious in a cool way. He buried him in Moab. So and Moses is not, even his body here at this point is not in the promised land. In the valley opposite Beth Peor, but to this day, we don't know when this day is, whenever this is being written or in the form that we have it today. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. Right? So Moses is buried, but they don't go to his, which is interesting because there's so many places that are gone to kind of remember. But Moses's memory is not in a particular place in this way. He was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. So Moses is not withering away. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days until a time of weeping and mourning was over. Now, verse 9, Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. So this is the passing of the guard. We saw this with Aaron and his son Eleazar right before he dies. With Moses and Joshua, it happened a little bit before, but Joshua kind of takes over as the leader, the replacement of Moses, kind of, but successor. But the last paragraph kind of says there's nobody like Moses. This is like a eulogy par excellence. for Moses. Verse 10. Since then, no prophet. So Moses is called a prophet here. No prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. We've seen this come up again. God says this specifically about Moses. With other people, I speak in dreams or from a distance. But Moses had this intimacy, this access, this relationship to God that was very unusual, very, very rare. And before and even after here in this story, of course, we'll get to Jesus. Things are special there, but who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt. Okay, so again, we're remembering back to that Egypt story, to Pharaoh and all his officials in the whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. So that's, I think, a fitting end to the book of Deuteronomy, kind of a little bit of an ode to Moses, originally reluctant, but mostly faithful leader. Moses does not have a lot of really big down points. The one major thing that keeps him out of the promised land, but all in all, seems to me a life imperfectly but yet faithfully well lived. A lot of frustrations, a lot of challenges, but that's Moses, and that's the completion to Deuteronomy. And tomorrow we are on to the beginning of Joshua. Feel free to leave your thoughts, comments, questions about Deuteronomy. My challenge for you, okay, you said, let me challenge you. Read through all these books. Isn't that challenge enough? I think we should ideally be able to give a big picture bullet point or a couple bullet points about each one of these books of the Bible as we're walking through it. Especially as we're not newbies necessarily anymore. Maybe some of us are, but if somebody asks us, what's the book of Deuteronomy about? What's the book of Leviticus about? I think we should have something to say. It's just a challenge for you there. So, all right. See you later. Bye.